Welcome to the Returning Raven, Clarity Points for Truth, where we look closer at the yoga you don't know, the one with hidden forms, worldview, sorcery, and philosophy that clouds and deceptively influences culture, church, family, and you. I'm Dr. Alana Arguello. It's time to leave the fog, get out of the gray, and into the light. Join me today at the Clarity Point. Welcome to the Returning Raven, Clarity Points for Truth. I'm your host, Dr. Alana Arguello. In today's episode, Worldview, Lunatics, and Lawlessness, we will take a closer look at Satan's mind and some highlights from Posture, or Chapter 10, in my book, Unearthing Yoga's Ancient Roots, Exposing Sorcery and its Transcultural Reach. If you haven't ordered your book yet, please do so on Amazon so you can more easily follow along, and then you'll have it as a resource to dig deeper and share the truth with others. Posture, or Chapter 10 in the book, is titled Yoga's Core. This episode is slightly longer than the others, but not too bad, so please bear with me as it's an important episode to lay the ground for your understanding the next episode, one that addresses how the Christian church may not realize they are contributing to cultivation of the soil in America that's a fertile culture for something similar to Nazi Germany, and truly ready for the Antichrist. So let's get started. Pantheism is a worldview that believes God is the universe. The universe you see, hear, and smell, each thing is God. But in panentheism, God in all, also all in God. An image often used for panentheism to illustrate the worldview is the goddess pregnant with the earth. Or you can think of a smaller circle manifested within a larger circle, smaller being the universe, larger being God. In panentheism, the perceived transcendent God, the thoughts of a God outside or separate of self, is actually in all, and all is in God. The transcendent is in you, so it pervades all. In other words, God is in all because all is in God. You are in God because God is in you. And God is in you because you are in God. You are not separate. I'll give a future teaching on how this differs from the biblically described God, but for now, understand this. 1. The Bible throughout describes a God very different than an Eastern pan or panentheism type of God. So much so that if a Christian were to describe their God in a panentheistic way, they would have to reject the Bible and would need to recognize that if they want to believe in the Bible, they need to confess and admit that they've misidentified the true God and need to return to the scriptures, because there are very clear and distinct differences between how God's nature is described in the Bible and that in panentheism. In fact, panentheism changes not just God's nature, but humanity and the gospel. Panentheism is a worldview that is seen in the ancient pagan world and often described simply as an Eastern worldview. But know that panentheism is not only from the East, but also Egypt, Babylonia, just to name two other regions. This leads us to number 2. A pan or panentheism type of God results in a God that can change. A changing God means he could change his mind about loving you, which means he is not pure love and could not provide the gospel of grace. And it also means he is not perfect. He needs to grow and be added to. He is not self-existent, not all-knowing, not all-powerful, not complete. It is a God that is evolving, that needs something or someone to grow, and is essentially attempting to evolve as well, So a panentheistic God means humans can evolve, even become perfect. This is not the God of the Bible, and not how humans are described with a sin nature, going through sanctification, not perfect as we walk on this earth. If you're born again, you are not dead in your sins any longer. But as 1 John tells us, if you think you are no longer a sinner, then the truth is not in you. We are sinners saved by grace. Paul in the Word tells us, our flesh wrestles with the Spirit. You are not perfect, and through your own works in this life, you will never be perfect. And you most definitely are not, nor could become God. We don't become God in this life or in heaven. He is separate from us. And the last thing for now that you should know about panentheism, it is growing in America as a worldview. It's the worldview of most religions and cults. It's even beginning to be accepted by once atheistic science world. And there's evidence of it to have snuck into the church, replacing the God of the Bible with more of an Eastern, Hindu or Buddhist type of God, an Eastern Jesus. More on that later. Pantheism and panentheism seem similar, and they definitely can be interchanged easily, but panentheism allows for a few extra things that seem to trick and lure our depraved minds a little easier than just plain old pantheism, which may be why it is so easily accepted cross-culturally and subculturally, like within the secular scientific arena. And this is probably why at the root of most ancient religions, cults, and ancient philosophies, it is what looks like on the surface as pantheism, but once it gets developed or lived out, it's really panentheism. That's what gets exposed. Or as a religion's sacred text add to and build on their scriptures, though they may start in pantheism, eventually the narratives begin to require that panentheism surface or at least be reflected. Panentheism allows for the following. 1. Individuals to harness power through practice, and they can work to remember they are actually all God. So there's room to evolve, or rather return to a supreme nature through works and effort. It also allows for a belief that you are born God, so you can get yourself through works to return to that God. Second, in Hinduism, the little self, or little soul, Atman, moves toward big self, big soul, big Atman. And side note, Atman, the meaning, is rooted in Sanskrit's breathe. This is why you see various breath work exercises in yoga, and specifically in pranayama yoga. So since all are God, working toward or back into the realization of all God, this allows for a selling of, we are all in this together. The collective embrace and cohesion of unity and equality, while also giving room for individuals to struggle and take action in a pursuit of the higher state. Let me translate this into everyday applicability. This means that no matter if your family's cultural heritage comes from a collectivistic group mentality, like many Latin and Asian families, or if you come from an individualistic group heritage, like Irish or Scottish. It also doesn't matter what end of the political spectrum you are on, for example, socialism and communism, or capitalism. Yoga's core worldview, panentheism, has a place for you. You see, worldview matters. Worldview, meaning how you think of, what you think of God, purpose, and humanity, and how you see our existence within the universe, matters. It will drive family, culture, and politics. And it can and will guide, sway, or establish your everyday decision-making. To this point, what's interesting about panentheism as a worldview is that it allows you, an individual, to play an active role in the return to godhood, since God is in you and you are in God, which allows humans to race to reach that point. But let's stop here briefly and consider human depravity. Individual gods only allows for further sin and opportunity to exalt oneself or certain ones over others. Yet at the same time, this can occur while declaring we are all in this together. We are all equal God, and wave the man-made banner of unity. But this attempt at individuals evolving while providing space for the collective to evolve may sound good or cool or inclusive, but the lie of man becoming God only comes from Satan, the father of lies. And no matter how it is sold, it will not end in good. And in fact, by choosing panentheism, you are God, I'm God, your neighbor is God, and we are all God together. I think Satan likes this worldview over plain old pantheism, because not only does it drive action by individuals, but it drives actions by individuals to control the collective, the group. It demands a hive mind mentality. And if the depraved, wicked heart believes the lie that it is good, and God, with a driving notion to come to reality the declaration that we are all equal, the same all God, because it's not just equal, it's equal gods, then it can determine by each his own to judge the collective, and some declare, yes, they are God too, but since they are evolving incorrectly, or not as fast as they should, or the right way, then they are a weaker manifestation of all God. So I'm above them. In this manifested state, I'm closer to Brahman. And since they are me and I am them, it's really just that this version of the God is closer to higher self Atman and Brahman. Then it's okay to get rid of that lower level useless manifestation of God. I'm not really killing it because it's me, and the stronger version of me recognizes this. Like a crooked politician, it allows to announce all equal from the platform, but the worldview and reality of our depraved state inevitably creates certain special ones that are allowed to self-exalt themselves over others, and all in the name of the good for the collective whole, because the weaker ones, the ones less close to Brahman, need to learn from those that are a little more evolved. 3. Yoga philosophy allows for certain special supreme ones to show the way, because though all distinction or individuality is an illusion, Maya, you can, if it speeds up your absorption back to Brahman, you can isolate and perceive any god of your choosing to worship. In other words, you can pragmatically use the idea of a special god supreme, be it a deity like Krishna or an Eastern form of Jesus, or yourself, or a special leader like a cult guru or an antichrist, to be higher than the rest for only a period of time, so you can step into the fullness of divine ultimate reality. In other words, perception of a single God, like Krishna, Jesus, yourself, your leader, can be used as a tool to aid in your realizing godhood. This is called bhakti yoga. Remember, I've mentioned there are many forms of yoga that you may not realize or are not always in the public. It's not always called yoga. This is one of them. When you hear a non-Christian Hindu say they worship one God, like Krishna or any other one God, they are practicing what is called bhakti yoga. And these exalted special ones in your worship of them is justified no matter what they do, because it is getting you and everyone else to the collective all-God Brahman. Their one-God worship is temporary, as it's just a means to an end, a support tool to get them to realize they too are Krishna, because they too are God. If you're enjoying this episode of the Returning Raven Clarity Points for Truth, please take a minute, like, subscribe, and be bold and share this video. And if you're wondering why this episode is covering a range from panentheism, good and evil, hive minds, and a culture set up for a leader, please be patient. It's information you need to prepare for the upcoming special episode. There's no real good or evil in this worldview, and truth is subjective. Good and evil gets put in the gray. This is why you may have noticed many platforms of yogis and yogi groups justifying political aggression aligning with Palestine and campaigning to increase yoga in that area. In forums after the murder of Charlie Kirk, where they talk about the do no harm aspects of yoga, still allowing for violence because in their opinion, someone's free speech ideas didn't align with their determined best for the collective whole. In other words, the do no harm in yoga is not do no harm to individual dignity of life, though that can be subjectively interpreted and applied depending on the person. It also can, and often is interpreted to mean do no harm to Brahman, the collective consciousness, to which we all need to get back to, and certain special ones can determine what that process should look like. This, too, is why in the history of Eastern worldview influence and yoga, historically has seen the production of the likes of sorcerers, but you'll also soon learn in the future episodes that you have cannibals, murderers, child sacrifice, and Jew haters. The all-pervasive one, Brahman, discussed in the last episode, that created distinctions for amusement, has no real identity. It is simply universal consciousness, the highest reality, absolute reality truth. This is the all God. This is why, in an earlier episode, you learned you are both creator, creation, and really neither creator nor creation. It's the supreme cause, but nothing created separate from itself. It is itself. But even giving it an it is really too descriptive. There's no distinction between either creator or creation. Brahman at root means expansion out, enlarging, and then returns in. A constant impersonal expanding or becoming and returning, or absorption. This is why panentheism truly fits the idea of all God more clearly than just pantheism. Please don't confuse Brahman with Brahma, which loses the last letter N, which among meaning other things is also the descriptive manifestation of creator in the Hindu Trinity. Brahma is the creator in the Hindu Trinity. This creator, too, is an illusion of being distinct from you, like all other gods, because all gods are the same all God, Brahman, universal consciousness. Brahman, with the N, is higher than the Hindu Trinity Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Lord of Yoga. That's the three Trinity. Those gods are only manifestations of Brahman, all God. All is Brahman, and Brahman is all. Vedic priests are called Brahmins as they help in the correct way to perform yoga and other sacred rituals in Hinduism and call upon the celestial gods, the devas, or shining ones, to help the student get absorbed back into Brahman. This is why, since it is works-based, the idea leaves room for all equal, yet while having some humans, gurus, be closer to the source, the all God, than others, which easily opens the door to a caste system society or social group hierarchy, self-exaltation mentality, as well as subjectivity on what is considered moral and what is immoral, which all of the above is what yoga has produced historically. The limited celestial gods are too just manifestations and distinctions that are illusions. The ancient world of gods of the universe, or representing elements of the universe, are just considered forms or manifestations of the limitless mind or all God Brahman. In other words, the mind of Brahman. Though there's no real description of Brahman, since there's no distinction and there's no real identity, no individuality or personhood, universal mind is the only place in which Brahman can be identified. This is in part why yoga requires all be of the same mind ultimately. All need to come to the same true knowledge that of all God. It also is why historically Brahman has been related to the moon deity, because the moon is the mind god. This is why, in part, Shiva, the Lord of Yoga, wears the crescent moon. This also should give you perspective when you see the crescent moon in many other pagan religions, but also how in the scriptures, the word lunatics, luna, moon, comes from the Greek of those that worshipped the moon goddess. In scriptures, this describes ones that were demonically possessed. And lastly, this is in part why physical yoga, or the gym kind, focuses on celestials and creature postures. But at the root in Sanskrit, the gym studio exercise yoga, hatha yoga, is sun and moon god worship. We will talk more later about the sun god of yoga, but for now understand that a pagan religion's supreme god is a mind that through your gym exercise yoga has you worshiping in part the moon to connect your mind with the pagan mind god so as to control your mind, to control all minds, into believing they are God. And no wonder medical research shows yoga at times produces lunacy, psychotic behavior, because the mind gets broken in yoga. And like the ancient world, worship of moon goddess produces lunacy, psychotic, demonic behaviors. To conclude here, you've already learned that yoga promises you will never be born again, but there's more to that promise. You are also told that as you absorb back to the mind the universal consciousness that is referred to as the supreme being, supreme knowledge, or supreme mind, you are assured you will never die. You'll never be born again, and you will never die, as you can realize Godhood. Church, these promises of yoga are the same lies given by Satan. He said in the garden, "Surely you won't die." And so does yoga. And though Brahman claims to have no real identity, no real way to describe it, but it manifests in all forms of pagan and celestial gods, and claims it can be reached by any and all people, which there's evidence it has, it should, in light of Genesis, be clear to a Bible-believing Christian who this hidden, pervading reality is. It is the God of all false religions. It is the God that says all are God. It is the God that says you'll never be born again. It is the God that destroys minds and causes possession. It is the God that assures you, take this fruit of yoga, and surely you won't die. But why is Satan using the same lie that caused the fall? We already fell to sin and death. So why keep using it? What's the end goal now? First, please remember, we went over how yoga's gospel, yes, yoga has a gospel, is by description what John referred to as Antichrist spirit. Second, understand something else. In yoga, there is no good and evil. You learned in the last couple of episodes that part of Tantra yoga philosophy is to make what is good evil and what is evil good. This is not because there is good and evil. This is because by flipping things on its head, by canceling things and replacing it with a near opposite, you are also dismantling the mind into understanding what you perceive as this or that, good or evil, is really nothing. None of it really matters. It's an illusion. Again, this is why when you see morality going out the window in a culture, it is evidence of yoga dominating the minds of the people. And when you see immorality justified as logical or true, know that this is not the end goal. At first, there's an exchange for good and evil. Immorality must replace morality. But that is not the end goal. The end goal is dissolution, to dissolve the mind of any definitions of good or evil, moral or immoral, to go completely lawless, no measure of right and wrong, because no right or wrong is real. You see, if you declare something that has long been held as immoral to be moral, you still are declaring law. But the goal of yoga, Tantra yoga philosophy, is for lawlessness. Each claim their own way, subjectively choose, because then each God brings forth realization of all God. And since we have depraved hearts and the wickedness of man truly has no end, the immoral in the eyes of the Christian will only get worse. But from the eyes of the yogi, one is getting closer to Brahman, all God. What does this mean considering the end times and its Antichrist? The unleashing of evil in the end times and the man of perdition. What is he called? The lawless one. Yoga philosophy and practices are the perfect fit for the description of the Antichrist. I will say that again. Yoga philosophy and practices are the perfect fit for the description of Antichrist. Please wake up, church. Have you heard people in the church excuse yoga because it's not a religion? Yoga's for all. That's actually true and dangerous. It's a spiritual practice and therefore for all. Anyone and everyone could practice it. This is why large international groups and movers and shakers purport that yoga is what will unite the whole world. It is for all because Satan intended it to be that way. And the panentheistic core of yoga can reach communist or capitalist and all in between. It claims the best for the collective whole while still allowing some to rise to power and lord over us. Satan is still using the core and practices of yoga not only because it appeals to our depravity, and not only because it can mask itself or bend and shape itself to any religious or political system. He continues to use yoga because it allows, rather it creates, the ability for a special one to rise up and show others the way to godhood. You see, I suspect and I warn that the man of perdition, the lawless one, the Antichrist, will only be able to exalt himself above all else and everyone drink that Kool-Aid because he will say something familiar. He will say, Namaste. In Sanskrit, Namaste means I bow to the God in you as you will bow to the God in me. The latter is a demand in the language, as you will bow or prostrate to the God in me. A demand because it affirms acknowledgement in the worldview of yoga, that all are all God. To the tune of Satan, he will happily call out godhood in all God, and then have them bow to him so he can show the way for all to evolve. But instead of the Brahmins who conjure and evoke the celestial gods, the shining ones, to guide the students, instead Antichrist will be governed by the big Atman, the brightest deva himself, Satan. And just the way the yogis and yoginis of the world today are justifying the harm to Kirk and others, because do no harm means sometimes doing harm to those they declare are harmful to the collective, will result in the crowd putting their hands together and bowing their heads to their guru Antichrist and saying Namaste, as militant arms are taken up against the Jews and anyone that claims the true Christ in the tribulation. So I guess my last questions and my last challenges to you today are, church, why do we continue to support yoga in our lives, homes, and churches when it is part of a system that Satan used to have the world fall to sin and death, and the system in which Antichrist will use to deceive the masses and to kill more Jews than were killed in the Holocaust and slaughter the saints during the tribulation? Should we claim the name of Jesus, take his name upon us, and yet allow for and participate with such darkness? And now that you understand Brahman is universal world consciousness and yoga is attempting to conform your mind to this all consciousness, to reject a measure for truth of right and wrong, to exchange good and evil, to then grow to a place of lawlessness, and that you can do so since you are God, and you can focus on other human gurus that are perceivably higher than others. So as they teach you, you can eventually be as high as them. What does this mean for the church when God specifically tells us in Romans 12:2-3 not to be conformed to the world, not to think of yourself as higher, and instead let God transform and renew your mind so you may know what is good, well-pleasing, and the perfect will of God? Yoga says conform to the world. God says don't. Yoga says think of yourself higher. God says don't. Yoga says to bow down, prostrate, namaste to another. God says this is idolatry. Don't do it. And those that do it won't inherit the kingdom of God. Yoga says that there is no right and wrong way, but God says there is. And that the only way to know that right way is not to do or accept the ways that have you conform to the world's thinking. So how in the world is it okay to practice or accept yoga in all its forms and philosophy, the very thing that is conforming your mind to universal world mind consciousness, Brahman? Church, it's time to really choose this day whom you will serve. It's time to get the pagan worship out and worship in truth. This is The Returning Raven. I'm your host, Dr. Alana Arguello. Please join me at the next clarity point for truth as we look at what this information has to do with anti-Semitism and Nazi Germany. Till then and after then, I pray you will worship in truth. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today on The Returning Raven. I'm Dr. Alana Arguello. For a closer look again at truth, I'll see you at the next clarity point.